Bob, last year we
Yes.
live in another world. It's a new
Yes.
world. Oh, yeah, wholly different. Please,
Yeah.
let's talk about maybe first about Biden administration. What
Yes.
happened? We could say that Biden administration is almost finished.
Okay. Well, it depends on where you'd like to start. I mean, in terms of talking about the Biden administration being finished, it's not finished until it's voted out of office if he runs for re-election in 2024. But it's clearly the case that things are going very badly, and they're going very badly in ways that he could not have anticipated, and I don't think anyone could have anticipated. And I think a lot of this is simply, I would just simply say bad luck in terms of the simultaneous occurrence of a lot of things. But the first thing that was clearly a setback was that he and I think the country may have anticipated that the COVID-19 pandemic would be behind us by now, but it's not. It's still something that's dominating what's been happening, and has been the cause of what's been happening. The inflation we have today can be related to things associated with the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of the supply chain bottlenecks and all of those kinds of things. And then, so the economy has been tied to COVID-19. And then on top of all that, the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia now has really complicated things in very extreme ways as well. So I think a lot of this is bad luck in terms of things he could have done to prevent all this. I mean, if he had a way of magically making the COVID-19 virus disappear, I think that would have gone a long way towards solving the problems that we currently have. Although that's not necessarily related to what's been obviously not related to what's been happening in international affairs.
Bob, in which measure inflation harms a U.S. president?
Well, I think any economic crisis scale issues can be harmful to any president, whether it's high prices or whether it's high levels of unemployment associated with a recession or economic growth. Those kinds of things occurring during a presidency can substantially damage the presidency and the party of the president in midterm elections. I mean, there's a historical pattern of that we can cite. That is, bad economic conditions during a midterm election will do in an American presidency. And
do you think? Excuse me. Do you think that maybe the inflation for Biden administration has the same impact to COVID for Trump?
Yes, I mean, I would claim that the way Trump handled the COVID-19 crisis basically prevented him from being reelected. He could have handled that very, very differently. But there's a difference. That is, in the Trump case, he took the wrong position on the issue. He could have treated it as a crisis issue, and even if the country was being hurt by COVID, he could have still gotten reelected if he had taken the position that he was going to lead the nation in this war against COVID. And the fact that the war wasn't going well and he hadn't succeeded yet, I don't think that would have hurt him in a presidential election if he was out in front on the issue and trying to deal with the virus in terms of providing economic assistance, but also in terms of following through on his Operation Warp Speed, not only helping create the vaccines, but helping distribute them widely as well. I think that would have benefited him. In Biden's case, is the way the public evaluates his performance on inflation has to do with the high prices themselves. Even if he's been doing his best to deal with it, this is something he's being held accountable for.
And Bob, we could say at this time that due to the inflation phenomena in the U.S., the Republicans will recover the control of both chambers at the end of this year.
I think the way
could the inflation had this impact?
I think the way it currently looks is that the high prices and well, that's the high prices now, and also with the stock market doing poorly. That's it. I think that's going to come. That's compounding things a little bit further as well. But I think the high price of gasoline, will lead to the almost very likely lead to the Democrats losing control of the House of Representatives, because the votes for the House of Representatives could be very closely tied by voters to the performance of the administration. Now, the same applies to the Senate, in the sense that the high prices will help mobilize voters to vote for, help mobilize Republican voters to vote for Republican candidates. But the one thing that's different in the Senate is that you have the peculiarities of individual Senate races that could come into play here in a way that could conceivably enable the Democrats to hold on to the Senate. But I think the House is the body most likely to be affected, and I think there's a good chance the Democrats will lose the Senate as well. But I think the jury is still out on that.
Involvement of the U.S. in Ukraine war can have any impact at the level of public opinion and at the end of the voting process of next November?
Well, I think in theory it could, depending on how well the war is going there. But at this point, it looks as though the war is going to be a long, drawn out war.
Excuse me. I say impact at the level, for example, as Iraq war of Afghanistan involvement had to the Bush junior presidency, similar in that way.
Well, in the case of the Bush presidency, what hurt the Bush presidency wasn't so much Afghanistan, but what was happening in Iraq. That was the big thing, because that led to his party losing seats in the 2006 election, and then led to contributed to the Democrats winning in 2000. Democrats winning in 2008.
Excuse me, the cat is
yes.
want to participate in the meeting.
Yes. Right.
Excuse me.
No, but I think it was the war in Iraq that hurt the Bush administration. I think in the current case, I mean, what's interesting is that the public supports the Biden administration, and also there's bipartisan support for what the Biden administration is doing. But on net, the progress in the war, even if the war were going better, would probably not be enough to overcome the harm that's being done to the Biden administration by problems in the economy, and especially inflation.
Okay. We are seeing, for example, in Latin America now, that all governments are losing elections due to the economy. For example, maybe Bolsonaro will lose the election next October.
Yeah.
We saw, for example, in Colombia, the traditional political forces of the right political forces are losing. In Argentina, the government is for the situation of the Fernandez administration is similar to Biden in the U.S. And we are seeing in maybe at the world level, all governments losing election. First, it was the COVID, but then it was inflation and the economy, as that political counselor of Clinton said that it's economy stupid. We could say then it was COVID, and now it's economy again, as the Clinton advisor said in that times. We're living now a similar process that it's economy stupid now again.
Yeah, I think that's right, and the reason is that the voters are upset about the economy. They hold the current government responsible for it, and even though they can't, it may not be the case that voting in a new government will necessarily improve things. Voters simply may say that it's simply time for a change, and we should take our chances with a new government because the current government is not working. That's basically the logic that's at play here. They don't necessarily have to have confidence in the new government, but they're completely disappointed with the current government and want it out.
Bob, if the Biden calls you a phone call and asks you, how can I recover my administration? Which would be your advice in that sense? Do you think that it's reasonable to think about the recovery of the government?
At this point, as we say, that the train has basically left the station, and it's not clear how much the Biden administration can. It's not clear if the Biden administration can change anything directly. I think the problem is that the damage for the 2022 election may have already been done, but with regard to 2024, that's a long distance away, and a lot of the things that he's doing, that he's been trying to do now, and with inflation taking its course, it's possible that those things will resolve themselves by the time of the 2024 election. The thing that the Democrats have historically tried to emphasize is that they can compete with the Republicans if they can get out their voters to vote and mobilize their voters. The problem is that the Republicans have been doing a very good job in mobilizing their own voters, and they've increased their support. And what the Democrats are trying to do, at least with respect to both elections, is use the current hearings in Congress on January 6th, and also emphasis on gun control and the abortion issue, to mobilize their base of support, and hoping that they'll be able to get out their vote to offset the possible gains that the Republicans will make. But that's a very tall order, and I don't think the arithmetic of voting is such that will work to their advantage in the 2022 election. But come 2024, it's a bit of a different story, because you have a presidential election year, and now you have Biden running for office against a Republican opponent. And right now, Biden isn't running again. Biden is not being compared to anybody right now in the current election. His party is being evaluated in the election. But with regard to the presidency, all bets are off in terms of betting that this is a sure sign that the Democrats will lose the presidency in 2024. And history is our guide here. That is, after the 1994 election, where the Democrats took a huge beating, Bill Clinton was able to win re-election in 1996. The same thing for Barack Obama. After his party took a major hit in the 2010 election, he was able to win re-election in 2012. And that's because you have a president who's running for re-election against a Republican opponent, and there's a comparison that's going to be made between the two. And so now in speculating about the 2024 election, it makes a big difference with regard to who Biden, assuming Biden's the candidate. I mean, we don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case, but who the Democrat is going to be running against. And
Bob, excuse me, Biden was not a candidate with too much appeal for the lefty side of the Democratic Party. For example, for the followers of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Biden was too much establishment for them. How do you think they are leaving the lefty groups of the Democratic Party? How are they living now the political history of this administration? Do you think that Biden could recover the support of these groups?
Well, that group is disappointed. But what's really interesting right now is that even if and AOC has even said this herself, that she thinks that the Biden administration has been doing as well as it can, basically. And for them, they may be disappointed, but again, here it's the choice between supporting Biden, and hopefully Biden will win against whoever the Republican is in 2024, or if not supporting Biden and let the Republican walk into office in 2024. That would be, an extremely dire consequence for that wing of the party, for the Democrats not to hold on to the presidency, because what the government they would get would be much worse.
Maybe, Bob, my last question is referred to the political process inside the Republican Party. Now, for the next term, how do you think that it could be the end of this story in relation to Trump, and maybe the other political leaders. I talk about, for example, the governor of Florida, DeSantis, or maybe the former Vice President Mike Pence, or, or another leaders for Ted Cruz. But how do you think that maybe?
If you think about it in terms of the Republican Party as an entity that has basically rational politicians in control of the party, and that's not necessarily the case, because at this point the party seems to be still Trump's party. But I think it's this has gone completely unspoken. But I believe but if you had a conversation with any Republican leader, including DeSantis and Youngkin, and I mean, I don't know about Ted Cruz, but certainly Marco Rubio. They're watching the January 6th investigation and seeing this as the opportunity to basically take the party back from Trump and win the 2024 election and control the presidency in both houses of Congress. I mean, there's an opportunity here. Trump, if you think about it carefully, is probably the worst possible Republican candidate. He lost the election in 2020, and can you really believe he's in better shape now in 2024 after the January? How he could possibly be in better shape in 2024 after the January 6th events and after this investigation, where you have Republican leaders and supporters basically testifying against him or saying things that clearly damage him in these investigations. That is, Trump is becoming damaged goods. I would argue he was damaged goods after January 6th. I think he's further damaged now. The only thing working in his favor is he has a base of support, and also the Biden administration is perceived as doing poorly. The Democrats are perceived as doing poorly. But clearly,
I hear you, Bob, and I think that maybe for the Biden administration could be a great news that Trump could be candidate. Maybe Trump could resolve some of their problems.
But I think that this will be a black mark on the Republicans if they can't use what's happening now to basically push Trump aside in 2024. Now they have to be careful. They want his supporters. They want his voters. But I think his voters could be persuaded to see that Trump is damaged here, and if they want to get the kind of national government that they want, the way to do it is without Trump being on the ticket. I mean, and there are plenty of other Republicans who could be good candidates. And DeSantis is the one everybody's talking about. The one that has proven himself already as being effective is gaining a strong base of support is Youngkin, who's the governor of Virginia. That is, he really showed how he could capitalize on the state of current politics.
Maybe, Bob, I would appreciate a last one. We are shocked, for example, in Argentina, when we watch news about, for example, the arms incidents in the US. It has any impact at the level of public opinion or the voting patterns, this incident in relation to arms?
You're talking about the killings in the United States.
The killings in schools or
that's reached the point where even Republicans think they need to do something about this to prevent a wave of voters voting against them because of they're being inactive now, and it looks like there's going to be some kind of compromise. And the compromise legislation looks like it's just going to be providing for stricter background checks before 18 to 21-year-olds can buy basically semi-automatic weapons.
Excuse me, and how the Republicans live, for example, that Trump went to talk in the annual meeting of the National Rifle Association in the middle of these events.
Well, no, but the Republicans, the base of the Republican Party, basically still supports the right to bear arms. It's just a question now of allowing some very, very modest reform. And the reforms that the Republicans are going to support would be enough to basically appease some of their Republican supporters who think that something, to think something should be done. The real test of all this is how will Republicans react if there was some kind of event in which Republican donors were killed at some event? How would they react to that?
Okay.
That kind of thing. Okay, and that will be the test for how the Republicans, will have to deal with the issue of guns.
Bob, thank you very much. I expect to stay in the U.S. for the November midterm elections.
Good.
So we could renew this meeting, this conversation there in New York.
Very good. Okay. Well, good
okay,
luck.
Bob.
Bye-bye.